Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Matty.
And I'm your co-host Jacob, and today's episode is part 5 of our series, Humanity of the Future, Agriculture and Food. Feels like we've been on this series for ages. We've took
Already
a couple
halfway.
we've took a couple of breaks in between. I think that's probably why it's added like an extra 2 weeks to the whole thing. But yeah, there's just so much to talk about. It's pretty much endless possibilities for the future. So hopefully either everybody listening by now is enjoying it or they've had enough. But I'm really enjoying it, and I'm excited for this episode because I don't know a lot about it, but this is something that I talk about quite a lot in the ideas of like how we can solve these problems of the future to do with agriculture and food, especially when it comes to like spacefaring civilizations, because that really does need to be thought out. So yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah. So I know you're going to be more interested in the futuristic, spacey, techie stuff, but yeah, I've been had a bit of an interest in this for a while with like the infrastructure side of stuff and like how we actually feed people from a logistics point of view. But yeah, there's lots of interesting innovations, obviously, over the last sort of 10 years or so. Things like veganism and reducing food waste, those sorts of things have become big issues that people are talking about. So yeah, lots happening now, and I think out of a lot of the topics that we've sort of done already, like this is one that I feel like is much more over the next sort of like 5 years rather than 50 years. Like I think a lot of the things we'll talk about, I've got to talk about at least, like we're going to see this decade rather than like the year 2050 kind of thing. So
no, that's fair. A lot of this is good, really, because a lot of the stuff that I've got is kind of similar. It's like things that are like slowly being adopted now, but it's more so aiming at that whole idea of how do we feed the planet in 2050, because the population's going to be, is it going to be around like 10 billion by then?
Yeah, I think 10 billion, about roughly 10 billion by 2050, I think.
Which is just nuts when you think about it.
Yeah, and the other, like it's probably something I'll come back to later, is that where that population is going to be, a lot of that population is going to be in places that are not great for farming, and probably over the next sort of couple of decades are going to be quite heavily impacted by sort of climate change and stuff. So, you know, the big food producing places in the world, you know, the plains of Europe and of sort of Central Asia and things, and obviously America, a lot of the population growth is not going to be in those areas. It's going to be in sort of Central Africa and Southeast Asia. So sort of trying to feed those populations, which are going to be very, very dense, is going to be a sort of big challenge, I think.
I agree with you. And it's already a problem, isn't it? Like we already have like food shortages all over the world. And as you were saying, like even now with like climate change, we're having like disasters and famine and people without stuff too. And especially with COVID, it's been really hard to get things around the planet and to get things in and out of countries, like borders and jurisdictions. So this is a massive one. And the little bit of research that I've done on it, it's kind of like, it's probably one of the most important things in human civilization. You could probably argue that like agriculture is what creates human civilization, because like it's almost because like it's like the thing, isn't it? And I wonder even like if going forward, because I know me and you in the past we've spoken loads about like the Great Filter and like different things like that. I wonder if like maybe that's how it is. Like it's all about agriculture, like how well a species can do this like well, because even though we've managed to get like quite a lot of food out to like the planet and everything, we're still not doing it like well or green, really, are we?
Yeah. Sort of just an aside, like a book that I read I read a book called Guns, Germs and Steel, and it tries to explain like how civilizations developed and like why in like the 15th century Europe was so much more developed than sort of other areas in the world. And food is like probably the number one thing on it, is that like when you're hunting it, if you're like a hunter-gatherer society, or you don't have like intensive agriculture, basically everyone in your society has to be dedicated to producing food. Like there's only so many hours in a day that someone can work, and sort of one person can just about produce enough food to feed one person. So like you can't really do anything. The moment that you're able to produce excess food, and like these sort of farming methods that I'm going to talk about sort of creating food more efficiently, it just frees up time for people to do other stuff. And this is why like a lot of like European nations developed as like quite small nations, and why Europe has quite small countries compared to like America, for example, is that you get like these little pockets of food production. And take something like Venice, you produce a lot of food because it's a very fertile area. It means that a lot of people can do other things, and you sort of have people that then can do art and can do science and can do all these other sort of human pursuits. And like that's an aspect of it, is like trying to produce food efficiently so that we're not worried about food. That's the whole point of it.
And like as well, it means like other like technological breakthroughs as well, because obviously if you're going to be cultivating plants and livestock, you've kind of must have figured out a way to like move water around and do all that kind of stuff. So it's like it's probably one of the most important things that you can have to a society, and it's probably one of the things that's been around the longest, right?
Oh yeah, like as I said, like these sort of farming, the rise of kind of modern agriculture is like often thought of as the start of what we would think of as like human civilization. These villages rising where you'd have a group of people that would farm, and then you could have one or two people who didn't have the farm, and they would be like the village chiefs and stuff. Like this is like the beginning of human civilization, is food production getting just beyond more than one person producing one person's amount of food. So but do you want to start with just like a few of the technologies that we've come across when we were researching and looking at this? Do you want me to kick off?
Yeah, you go for it.
So one of the bigger things that I coming across was like this idea of like vertical farming. So the idea of like not farming in big sort of open fields, but farming in sort of very dense areas and building upwards. So I'm sure you've seen things like hydroponics and aeroponics labs, where you just have like stacks and stacks of quite sort of sciencey looking equipment, where like plants are grown in sort of gels or in very precisely managed like thin layers of soil, and you just stack them on top of each other with like loads of artificial light and grow them in these sort of big towers. And sort of a lot of this is being incorporated into modern building design. So there's sort of lots of buildings are being built with sort of plants and trees built into the actual sort of building itself. So I think this is a really important one, is this idea of like bringing farming and bringing food production sort of into urban areas, because that means that you're getting more food production because you're using these spaces more efficiently. If you're using things like hydroponics and aeroponics, then you're able to more closely manage and more efficiently produce food. You're sort of generating food in areas that didn't used to generate food and would just be sort of like wasted space. And also you're cutting down on the need to transport the food and transport water and have people working sort of out in the countryside and stuff. So I've said before, like this idea of Earth gradually urbanizing, and I think it's probably a good idea to have at least some food production sort of close to where we're living. Because some stuff, things like salad leaves, they're so easy to make. We might as well just like grow it wherever we can, and sort of rather than have it out in the field and have to transport millions of lettuce across the ocean.
And as well, like putting all of those like crops and plants and vegetables like on the side of buildings and stuff, like you're saying, it also like cools the area down too. Because like there is nothing worse than being in a city in the middle of the summer. It's just too hot. Apologies by the way, anybody, if I look like I'm like slowly dying. It's because my room is roasting. The UK is having like a heat wave. It's like 30 degrees in this room. I've only got a fan, and I've only recently had my first jab, so everything kind of is going wrong for me today. But we're getting through it. But that's cool. I think that is kind of something that we should definitely be looking at doing. Even like with me and my partner are like looking into like houses and stuff, even though this is like super far off when we want to like build one. That's the kind of stuff that we want to do. We want to have like vegetation on like the walls and stuff or on the roof, because it's really cool how people do that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the technologies that, well, I wouldn't really call it a technology, but it's something that I was looking at for today's episode, is just plant-based meat substitutes. So you've got companies like Beyond Meat from Los Angeles and Fry Family from South Africa and Impossible Foods from California that are basically just making like plant-based burgers, sausages, or soy pea-based protein strips and stuff like that. And it's all surrounding like this idea that how much meat production has like an impact on like the global like ecosystem and biodiversity system. And obviously you can massively lower your carbon footprint by not eating meat, but it's difficult for people not to have meat, because I get it. I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan or anything. I do like my meat, but some of these things aren't bad. I don't know if you've tried any of them. If you don't know that you're having it and someone just does it for you, I couldn't tell the difference. But if I know, if I'm cooking it and I know I'm having it, I can tell. But I think this is another good thing that we could be doing, because obviously it lowers like meat usage and like the need for it. Because obviously, like, have you ever watched the documentary? Is it Cowspiracy on Netflix?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I've sort of seen bits of it. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just nuts how much like methane and carbon dioxide and stuff that cows produce. I know isn't there like a study that's been done or that's being done that if you feed cows seaweed, it like significantly lowers their methane. Yeah, that's cool. But I think these plant-based meat substitutes are good because obviously you don't need the animal. Because I'm always the kind of guy that likes to look at things from a spacefaring viewpoint. These kind of things just make sense because you can grow them in labs. You could probably 3D print them. That's another technology that I'm going to go on to in a little bit. But yeah, it just seems like plant-based meat substitutes and all that kind of stuff seem like a good way to go because they're like cheap to produce. They kind of have everything in them that would be the same as anybody else eating like the beef or chicken version. And yeah, it just like lowers it all. I think it's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, to be honest, the main sort of driving factor is just going to be economics again. And I think it's similar to sort of like solar panels and wind turbines. Like, ultimately, a lot of people aren't sort of conscious about this thing. They just sort of care about what they're getting and what they pay for it kind of thing. So, at least sort of my experience like a couple of years ago is that a lot of these things when you're buying it from the supermarket are like quite expensive. Like if you go into like Tesco and buy like a Beyond Meat burger, it's something like £4 for like 2 burgers, which is like 5 or 10 times as much as you pay for normal burgers.
That's fair.
So like, a lot of people are going to go look at it like, hold on, like you're saying that a lot less material goes into these things because you don't have to sort of use the soy to feed the cow. You just use the soy directly, which is more efficient, which it is. But like, okay, what am I paying for then? And ultimately, it's just sort of like economies of scale. Sort of meat production is so consumerized and massive that they're able to do it so cheaply.
Yeah.
Whereas sort of these sort of alternatives aren't yet. So I think over sort of the next 5 years, we'll see as more people get into it and these sort of things grow, the prices will come down and then more and more people will get onto it because it just makes sense. Like, as you said, like it's not, I think it is different, but it's not worse than sort of like the burgers and sausages that they're replacing. But ultimately, it just comes down to what sort of people's perceptions are of it and what they're getting, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine it'll be plant-based diets, won't it, for people that go to like Mars and the moon, unless it's like freezer-dried food, like what they have on the ISS.
Yeah, you might have a bit of dried bacon or something for the first few moments.
I've always been really interested in that kind of food. When I went to Kennedy Space Center when I was like young, I bought loads of it in like the foil packaging and I thought it was so cool. And I ate it all, to be fair. It wasn't that bad. I had like the strawberry ice cream and stuff like that where you just like cracked it and had like the water to it and stuff. But yeah, I'm getting into those you know, like those survival meals that you have when you go camping.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's class. I'm one of those people though that like really like to be like self-sufficient if I'm doing something. So like when I'm going camping, I like to have like protein bars, meals that you can just add hot water to, and I'm just in my element then. So I think all that kind of stuff's kind of cool. I could be a seed guy if I'm honest with you. I could have like a seed diet.
Yeah, speaking of meat and space, one of my mates, he did similar. He went to Russia, I think, and he went to like their equivalent, and he brought back this borscht that was in like a tube, and it was like a borscht puree, like in a tube, and it was the worst tasting thing I have ever had. It was awful.
That's grim.
It was this like beef toothpaste. It was horrible.
That's not good. What other things do they have up in space? Because they have like potatoes, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have milk, or do they not have milk?
I really don't know. I think a lot of it is dried stuff.
Yeah.
Then they have to add water to it, which is recycled. But
oh yeah, like coffee mate stuff and like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do know they grow sort of some, whether it's for science projects, whether they actually do it themselves, just to eat. I think it's probably a bit of both. They grow like salads and stuff. So yeah, stuff. Yeah, the salads. The reason why I keep going about salads is because, like, I've seen like loads of like weird ways in which like people want to be doing this stuff, and like I've seen this one with IKEA. They've got this idea where they want to have like a salad, and they'd use like things like hydroponics, and they would like grow the salad at a salad bar, and it would be able to grow quick enough that like customers could come along and could like pick their own salad at the salad bar, and then like it would replenish itself.
What?
And like, you know, it's things like cress and sort of small lettuce that can grow like in a few days. But they say their system, so it's part of a collaboration with IKEA, this company called Local. They say their plants can grow up to 3 times faster than traditional gardens in this. They've got like LED lights and funky watering systems and things. It's all controlled by this like smart technology. But like it looks like a salad bar, and then in the center you have this like weird pink glowing box where like the salad is. And like you'd have like little machines in there that like pick salad as it becomes ripe, and then just like deposits it out so you can like take it.
That is nuts.
It looks awesome. Like it looks really, really cool.
That's awesome. Well, kind of going off that a little bit, I've got one to do with algae here, and it's all about like algae farming and how it could be like a potential game changer. And basically, I found this company called Terramino Foods, and they're a startup in San Francisco, and they've developed a process to grow fungi that can be turned into a salmon burger, and it tastes and looks and smells like actual fish. It just blew my mind. And basically one of the reasons why they're doing it is because there's like an abundance of algae production that you can do in like most marinas and freshwater environments. And they were saying that especially in like Asia, you can like have like massive amounts of it in all the lakes and stuff. But this company wants to like try and create all of the different like meats and proteins through algae and like putting tastes in them. And I just thought that was interesting too. I don't know if I could eat like an algae salmon burger, but it's interesting.
Yeah, algae is definitely an interesting one. Like, there's a lot of things going for it. Firstly, it's, as you said, you can grow it in like these. I know there's like plans to sort of grow it alongside conventional like fish stocks because it's just very easy to do. Sort of make a bit more money. But yeah, it's very easy to do. It's very cheap. But also because it grows so fast, it means that you can sort of very rapidly develop it and create new sort of like variants of it. Like if you're growing like potatoes, you only get like 1 crop of potatoes a year. So if you want to like breed them, realistically, it's going to take decades for you to be able to do it. But like with the algae, you could like genetically modify it or just sort of crossbreed it in some way. And, you know, you're growing sort of lots of generations of it potentially every day, so you can very rapidly like change it. So it doesn't surprise me that they're looking at algae and like trying to create different sort of foods with it, because you can it's much more possible to do it with algae, just the way that it grows and the way that it rapidly changes. So yeah, but yeah, I've not seen that one about the salmon algae.
It's Terraminio Foods, if you ever want to check them out, if anyone that's listening.
To be honest, it sounds like they've made an algae that smells a bit bad, and that fish, yeah.
Put two and two together, and that's what it does.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just reading here what they do. Yeah, so it's an algae, and they already specialize in plant-based stuff, but now they're researching into algae, and they've got this one that tastes similar to salmon. And with the growing problem of overfishing, as well as okay, so it's saying that mercury and microplastics are like severely affecting fish, but it's not affecting algae. So it could be a sustainable seafood replacement.
Yeah, there is a big problem with that. About there's like a very big concern that like very small fish and plankton and stuff absorbing like mercury and microplastics from the sea, and then they get eaten by like slightly bigger fish, and then they get eaten for like salmon and stuff, and like it all accumulates in these big fish in like quite big quantities. And like the mercury one's been around for quite a while, like sort of decades kind of thing. It's like a concern, but I think the general consensus is unless you're like eating cans of tuna every day, you're probably okay. But like the microplastics one is one that there's not a lot of research on it, and they're like generally quite concerned that there's a lot of plastic in fish that we might be consuming.
It blew my mind when I saw that article not that long ago of like there being microplastics found in like pregnant women and stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
It's just nuts. It's getting everywhere.
Yeah, it's it's particularly bad. The microplastics. Yeah, but yeah, I'm glad you sort of came on to talking about like fish stocks and stuff, because this was sort of one point that I wanted to talk about, was that it's quite similar to sort of the point I made about sort of recycling and things in a previous episode, is that very often people sort of focus on just one aspect of it. And I think for sort of food production, that's very often like CO2.
Yeah.
Like with like the recycling stuff, I said like people like focus on like plastics and like plastic waste because it's very obvious. Yeah. Whereas a lot of like other sort of issues go sort of unreported and people don't think about it so much. And I think it's sort of similar with foods in that people think about the sort of CO2 production a lot, but like equally as important is sort of land usage and water usage and sort of the environmental impact of sort of like species. If you're like planting huge fields of just one crop, then that can like have problems on sort of insects and birds and stuff in the region. So it's a difficult one to do, because this sort of argument came up a few years ago. Remember palm oil? Yeah. It was like a very big thing, probably 4 years ago or so. Like it became like really massive. Like people started like sort of like boycotting Nestle, I think it was, because they were using palm oil and things. Yeah. But like, and in some ways they were right to do that, because they were like complaining that sort of habitats are being deforested for palm oil, and that's causing damage to obviously the environments of the south and I think it's orangutans that live there and stuff, which is obviously bad. That's obviously bad, but like palm oil is a very, very high density oil. So like you get a lot of palm oil from your sort of area of land compared to other things. And it's something stupid. It's something like you get 200 times as much palm oil as compared to olive oil for the same land. Fair. So like it's about balancing things, and like palm oil isn't necessarily bad. Obviously deforesting sort of natural forest to do that is. Yeah. But like it could very easily swing the other way, where like, oh, everyone like avoids palm oil, we're never going to use palm oil again, and suddenly we're chopping down like 200 times as much forest to produce olive oil because people think about it as like the good thing, because it's like, and there's a lot of this sort of thing of like contending issues and like trying to find what is actually the best way to go with these things, I think.
No, I'd agree with you. I think that's one of humanity's biggest problems. It's just actually agreeing on things.
Mhm.
I think there's so many ways to do everything. Everybody thinks that there's a better way to do something.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Water's the one I genuinely think that in the next like 20 years or so, water is going to be a really massive issue.
yeah,
And it's sort of a lot of sort of farming is like pushing towards organic and sort of free range and stuff, which uses loads and loads of water, like
yeah,
a huge amount of water. And yeah, that's why I sort of talked about some of like these hydroponic things, which try to sort of reduce that and make it more efficient, because I genuinely think it's going to become quite an issue, and it already is in a lot of countries. Sort of people like the sort of farmers who are trying to produce crops, sort of having face off with people who are trying to sort of get water to drink and things. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, do you know what doesn't use a lot of water, Matty?
Algae.
High protein insect diets, Matty.
Oh yeah.
So this is an interesting one. So when I went out to like Thailand when I was a kid and a teenager, it blew my mind that people were eating like crickets and spiders and all that crazy stuff. And like I had a few, and to be fair, not the worst tasting thing ever, not the best, but not like the worst tasting thing. And obviously, this kind of practice, we'll call it, is like it's been adopted across loads of countries. You've got like Thailand, China, Brazil, Mexico, some parts of Africa, and sometimes it can be like quite a good thing. Maybe not necessarily for like super Western cultures that have gotten used to having a lot, but like a high protein insect diet could be like could be super beneficial for like tackling the war on malnutrition in like poverty and like countries that don't have anything or are underdeveloped. And it could also reduce the impact on the environment for meat heavy Western diets. I'm not someone now, by the way, everyone listening, that's going to start pushing insect diets like we should all do it, because I definitely would not. But I just thought it was another interesting one.
Yeah, I feel like for certain parts of the world, it probably is going to be quite important because it's already sort of like part of their culture. But
yeah,
I don't think in like Europe and America it's going to take off, because like we just don't eat those foods. And like if we are going to move away from meat, I think we're probably much more likely to go towards like plant-based than insect-based, just because what we're familiar with, unless someone's able to make a impossible burger out of crickets.
Well, you say that, but the French have snails.
True, that's true. French, yeah, that's a one-off there.
But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think really the future of food for humanity is going to be kind of like eating whatever grows best in your area, because we're probably going to move towards more of like a localized kind of environment where it's like supply on demand kind of thing, instead of these massive transportations, unless we go super sustainable and everything's green and we have fully electric trucks and everything's fine. But I could see it going more so like localized. And I think then it's going to be more so about like eating what your area is good for. So like if you live near the sea, you're probably going to have a fish heavy kind of like food choice in your area. Do you know what I mean? Or if you live in a place where there are loads of insects, it's probably going to be more of like a insect kind of barbecue kind of session going on. Or if you live in a place where there's lots of, you have the ability to like do hydroponics or like the ability to just grow a lot of plants, then you're probably going to be more on like a plant-based diet. But it's funny because humans are a funny bunch. I don't think we'll ever move away from meat. I think there will always be humans living on Earth for as long as Earth exists, eating meat. I think all of the other planets that we go to, I don't think they'll be meat eating humans. I think they'll probably be plant-based, or it'll be like lab grown like meats. Like I know because there's some like weird things, aren't there, that people are trying to do, like grow like chicken breasts and stuff from stem cell weird stuff. But like that's cool. But I do believe that like the future, I think the only place that you will ever be able to eat meat will probably be Earth, for as long as Earth is around. And then the day that the sun turns into a red giant and Earth is no more, if humans have managed to go and colonize some other planets. I shouldn't say colonize because we don't like that word. Explore other planets. Then we'll just be a meat-free society by then, I reckon.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, we took sort of European livestock across the Atlantic Ocean
Yeah,
and
but do you
used them in America.
Well, we're gonna like Noah's Ark Mars, just take like
Yeah,
2 of every animal. Yeah, why not?
We're gonna have to send something on the early rockets for sort of test subjects.
I'm interested in all of that kind of stuff, because I wonder if like you'll have to like genetically modify the animals and stuff to like deal with like the gravity and the radiation levels and stuff like that. Because they're like talking about doing it with like humans, aren't they? Like they were saying after like 3 generations, they're more likely to have like wider eyes and a little bit more of a yellow skin and stuff like that. But I wonder, that whole bit really interests me. I know this is a little bit different to food and agriculture, but that whole bit about like how humans will be able to give birth on Mars and like how we will adapt like certain things to be on Mars. I wonder if we took animals, if we'd have to adapt them. Obviously we probably would, but interesting.
Yeah, I think about it now, like almost certainly there will be an animal birth on Mars before a human birth. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
It probably will be something like a rabbit or something like that, but like that's not something that we can really experiment with particularly ethically, like with humans. And so yeah, I didn't really thought about it, that there probably will be an animal birth on Mars before human birth.
unless it is all like test tube.
Maybe
it's just not safe to do any kind of birth outside Earth's gravity, because that's like what your pelvis is designed for, and it's just strictly test tube stuff. But it's that will be an interesting one, because it's kind of the same as food and everything. Like they'll have to be adapted for other planets, and like I can imagine things like lab grown meat and algae and plant-based substitutes will all definitely be things of space exploration. They just make sense. But when it comes to like animals and stuff, I can imagine if you're going on like long expeditions in space, you couldn't take animals with you. But if you were 3D printing the meat, then maybe it's okay. But then how much material are you taking to 3D print the meat? Like, does everybody just get 1 steak a day for 300 days and then it's out?
Yeah.
But
yeah,
or are we going to be like crazy and have like mega structures like the size of Earth that have got agricultural farms on them and stuff? We'll just sail through space on the, because that's my big thing, is like agriculture works on the planet and it works on multiple planets, but like if we were really going to like move to a different star system or something, we'd really need something that we could make on the spot, like lab grown meat or something, but we'd need like an abundance of material just to be able to go.
Yeah, you'd need a lot of sort of biological material to like seed life. You can't just rock up there with 2 humans and sort of a few plants. You've got to have like a substantial amount of biological material to get there and get things going. But
that would be a great horror film, can I just say? Like a couple wake up on a spaceship traveling to another star system, right? And there's like this weird life that everybody has, and you all eat like this protein 3D printed food, but you find out that when the people on the ship are dying, they're being processed into the biological 3D printed machine. There's no way to escape, and you will just become your child's meal. That'd be a great horror film. So somebody pick that up.
That's a very... I just think it, because like...
It'd be one good way of getting biological material.
There's no other way to get like if you were traveling through space for like say thousands of years, you can't make matter. Like all of the biological matter you have on your ship at the start would be it. So like unless you're taking enough biological material to use for 1,000 years, you're gonna have to recycle it, which means that people probably would have to be like put into the soil and like left to decompose.
It's actually quite grim when you think about it. People will be like, I clicked on this episode to hear about agriculture and food of the future, and I got told that we're going to be recycled on a space station. It is nuts, though, really, because it's like you're saying, we can't just produce it out of nothing.
That's like what, like, we have on the International Space Station, we have to recycle the water. Like, if you're going to go very long distances, then the International Space Station is close enough by that we can sort of resupply it with food and biological material. But
you know what, Matty? We won't need to, because it will be robotic. It doesn't make sense for us to go that far doing something like that. It would just make sense to like somehow upload your mind to a robot, and then you don't need to eat for the 1,000 years that you're traveling there. Because otherwise it would be like a horror film. You'd just be like born onto this ship and just know that you're going to become like your children's meal.
That is grim. That is horrible.
Like talk about purpose in the universe. But have you got any other technologies? Or...
let me just have a look at my notes. I think there was one more, but you throw me off with the with the thingy.
At least on these journeys, even if they are being recycled into other meats, they have air conditioning. This place is disgustingly hot. I'm going to title this week's episode "Jake's Melting Away."
Yeah, so this is a good one I found, is that it sort of goes back to being able to like modify foods, and this is one example of it. It's like modifying foods to get around sort of people's intolerances and allergies. So this is one I came across, was about developing allergen-free nuts. So this example is a gluten-free tiger nut. So
I think I saw this.
They've grown this like type of nut, and it's sort of like free of gluten. They want to try and use that. It's really weird that like they're trying to do these sorts of things. Like things like nut allergies in particular are like a big one, because like nut allergies are becoming quite prevalent now. Like basically, sort of some people have nut allergies, so we eat less nuts, which means that more people get nut allergies. Yeah, and there's a real, that's not a concern, but like people think that like in sort of hundreds of years' time, like humans won't be able to eat nuts because we'll all just be allergic to them.
Yeah,
but like developing nuts that don't contain the allergen is like a really interesting one, and I thought it was just another example of sort of developing food and GM. So yeah.
I wonder if like we'll just do that with everything. Like if one day we'll just have like non-poisonous versions of things, just because if you want to eat it, you can. That's where we've got to.
Yeah, that was, I think, the last thing that I had. Unless you had anything else?
No, one quick question on that there, and I don't know if you're gonna know the answer, so apologies for putting you on the spot. But like with things like CRISPR and stuff, would it be possible to like take out an allergy from like a human on a genetic level?
I'm not sure. I don't do biology at all, but like I really don't know a lot about allergies, but particularly things like intolerance. So like an obvious one, I think, would be things like lactose intolerance and sort of gluten intolerance, because that is just like a gene that hasn't been switched on to like produce like for milk and lactose. It's lactase, like humans that can drink milk produce lactase, which breaks down the lactose in milk.
Yeah. So
like if you're able to modify someone just to switch on that gene so they started producing lactase, then presumably they would be cured of their intolerance. So yeah, I think sort of genetic therapy stuff, I think sort of coming out from like an environmental point of view is like, what's the point? Like, is it really worth like subjecting someone to like gene therapy just so they can drink milk? Or can they just sort of carry on their life drinking other things? But
I just wonder if in like the future, if things were hard to come by, if it just made sense to like remove all allergies and like intolerances. So like if things are scarce, you could eat just grass and your appendix won't blow or anything like that.
Yeah, make people not find spicy food spicy.
Yeah. But then what would be the point? What would be the point?
Yeah, That's a good
But
one.
because I like eating spicy food because it burns my mouth. If it didn't burn my mouth, I'd be like, this just tastes spicy.
Just tastes spicy. Yeah, lots of developments and stuff.
It's an interesting one, and I think, like we said at the start, it's going to be something. It's been something from the start, and it'll be something till the very end, or for as long as we are around. And I think it will be something that is going to be massively impact in like the next 5 to 50 years because of the world that we're moving into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's pretty nuts. But yeah, that pretty much does it for this week's episode. So if you enjoyed this week's episode and you're watching on YouTube, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Let us know down in the comment section below what bits you enjoyed, or if we missed anything out to do with agriculture or food of the future. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us a nice review because it helps with charting and all that fancy stuff. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you give us a follow because then you can have auto download episodes. And why wouldn't you want that? You don't have to keep up to date with our socials unless you want to keep up to date with our socials because we post the coolest memes ever. Well, science related memes. And you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Infinite Void Pod. And you can also drop us an email if you want to potentially be a guest or you have a episode topic to recommend. And that is theinfinitevoid@gmail.com. Oh no, theinfinitevoidpodcast@gmail.com. And you can go and follow our other project too, Twope News on Instagram and This Week on Planet Earth on YouTube. I've been your host, Jacob Carson, and so has Matty. And we will see you next episode. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about our brand new Patreon page.
Yeah, so we've devised a load of new goodies that are neatly packaged across 3 different tiers for you.
Tiers start at £3 and go all the way up to £10 a month.
Just to say, the Patreon is in no way an obligation, and we're going to continue making the podcast as it is freely available across all the platforms. But if you'd like to support us and show your support, you can now.
So yeah, head over to patreon.com/Infinite Void Pod for more information.